Welcome back. Today we're making this decadent caramel-filled Milky Way cake. We're going to start by making our chocolate cake layers. They need some extra time for them just to bake up and cool, and then we'll get going on all the other delicious components of this cake. I absolutely love this chocolate cake recipe because it is so moist, it's so tender, and it's super easy to make. We're going to start by sifting together our dry ingredients, and this includes our all-purpose flour, granulated sugar, unsweetened baking cocoa, baking soda, baking powder, and salts. We're going to sift that all together in a large bowl and then set it aside. Next, we are combining our wet ingredients together. Once those have come together, we're going to combine our wet and our dry ingredients, and we're going to whisk these together until our batter is smooth. We're then going to pour the batter into 4 prepared cake pans. These are 8-inch pans, and we've lined them with parchment rounds and sprayed them with a little bit of nonstick baking spray. These are going to pop into the oven for about 26 minutes at 350 degrees. These can vary a few minutes depending on your oven, so be sure to keep an eye on them. And I always like to kind of press on the top of the cake layer and feel if it springs back, and that's how you know they're all ready to go. So next up, I like to work on our caramel sauce. For this, we're going to place a saucepan over a medium heat, and we're going to slowly melt down 1 cup of granulated sugar. I like to add this in 4 parts, so you just add a little bit at a time, and as the sugar starts to dissolve, you can add in the next addition. Once your sugar has fully melted down, it should be kind of a deep amber in color. You're going to mix in your unsalted butter and a little bit of heavy cream. You want to add both of these slowly because they're going to cause the caramel to bubble up. You want to make sure that you're stirring vigorously, or else it can kind of bubble up out of your pan. Once the caramel sauce has started to come together, you're going to add in a little bit of salt, and then I like to pour it into a separate container and just set it aside to cool. For this cake, I'm going to start off with it in a glass bowl to drizzle over our cake layers, and then I'm going to add it into a plastic squirt bottle just to make it easy to add on our drips. However, the plastic squirt bottle is not necessary. You can also add on your drips just using a spoon. And because 1 drip clearly is not enough, next we're going to work on our chocolate ganache drip. We're going to heat our cream in the microwave until it just starts to bubble up. You could also do this on the stove. You're then going to add in your semi-sweet chocolate and let the mixture sit for 1 to 2 minutes to give it some time to help that chocolate melt. You're then going to stir the mixture somewhat vigorously until it comes together. At first it might look a little bit weird, but the more you stir it, it will get nice and smooth, I promise. I also am going to pour this into a little squirt bottle just to make our drips easier, and then I'm going to set it aside. Next up, we are working on our chocolate buttercream. So this is just my classic American buttercream base. We're going to be adding in some cocoa powder and some melted chocolate to really give it a rich, delicious flavor. So we're going to start by creaming together our unsalted butter. We're going to mix it until the butter gets nice and smooth. Then we're going to add in our cocoa powder, vanilla extract, and our salt. We're going to mix this on a medium-low speed, and at this point, we're essentially going to have made chocolate butter. So then we're going to slowly incorporate our powdered sugar. You want to mix this on a low speed so that you don't have too many big powdered sugar clouds escaping your bowl. Also, if you struggle with that, you can totally drape a kitchen towel over your KitchenAid just to kind of help keep everything contained. Halfway through adding the powdered sugar, I like to add in my heavy cream just to make the frosting easier to mix. We're going to mix on low for 1 to 2 minutes at the end of the process just to make sure our buttercream is silky smooth. Then we're going to cover it with plastic wrap and set it aside. And the final component of this cake is the nougat filling. Now, I struggled with this and I had to make it a few different times to really feel like I got the texture and the flavor right, because I wanted it to be kind of soft and fluffy and airy, and my first attempts were a little bit too soft and it made the cake really unstable. So we're going to start by combining our egg whites and our sugar. We're going to heat it over a saucepan with a little bit of simmering water. We're going to whisk it together for about 4 minutes until our sugar granules dissolve or it reaches about 160 degrees Fahrenheit. And we're going to beat it for 5 minutes on a high speed with a whisk attachment. And this is going to whip it up into this delicious, smooth, shiny meringue. And once we reach this stage, we're going to add in our unsalted butter. Then we're going to add in our cocoa powder and our vanilla and just a tiny pinch of salt, and we're going to mix just until that's combined. So this is going to make the filling a little bit softer, but it's going to give it that perfect color of like a Milky Way filling. So I like to make the nougat filling last just because sometimes it can kind of deflate over time. It's stable, I would say, for about 3 to 4 hours at room temperature, but it's not something you want to make the day before. Now it's finally time for the best part, assembling this cake. So we're going to start off, like always, just adding a dab of our buttercream onto our board and kind of pedaling it out with our large offset spatula. This is going to help stick that first cake layer in place and prevent it from sliding, which is also going to make it easier to build your cake up as you assemble it. So as we're making this cake, we're going to pipe a nice ring of our chocolate buttercream around the edge of the cake. We're then gonna fill the center with about 1/3 of our nougat meringue filling. We're gonna smooth that out and then add a super generous layer of our caramel. This recipe makes a decent amount of caramel, so you can really drizzle it on. We're gonna repeat this process with our remaining cake layers, and as you're doing this, just make sure that your cake layers are staying aligned. Sometimes they can get a little bit wonky, and you really want them to be nicely aligned so that way you can easily frost the cake later. If you wanted to, you could also add chopped up bits of Milky Way bars between the cake layers, but I felt like this cake had enough delicious things going on inside and it didn't need it. So once our cake layers are stacked, we're gonna actually pop the cake straight into the freezer to help the buttercream rings inside set before we try to frost it. The filling is a little bit soft, and if you try to immediately frost it, your cake layers might slide a bit and it can make it harder to really get a nice smooth coat. So once our cake has chilled in the freezer for about 10 minutes or in the fridge for about 30, we're gonna take it out and we're gonna add on a thick layer of chocolate buttercream. So once we've got all of our buttercream on our cake, we're gonna smooth it out first with our large offset spatula. Then we're going to use our bench scraper, and a really great trick is to run your bench scraper under hot water, dry it off completely, and then really slowly make passes around the cake. The heat from the bench scraper will almost make your frosting shiny. It'll make it look perfectly smooth, and it's just a really great hack for getting smooth frosting on the sides of your cake. Then we're gonna use our small offset spatula and just drag any overhanging bits on the top of the cake into the center to get a nice sharp corner. We're gonna pop this cake in the freezer one more time because we really want the frosting to be nice and firm before we add on our drips. Now throughout this process, our caramel and our chocolate ganache has been sitting out and it's probably come to room temperature and cooled down. So I really recommend popping it into the microwave for, I would say, 5 to 10 second intervals. I always kind of like to just rotate the bottle and see what the viscosity is. And once I feel like it's a good dripping consistency, I like to do a test strip on the back of the cake. So we pull our cake out of the freezer and we do one test strip with caramel, and as long as our drips look good, we're gonna go ahead and start adding them around the cake. Now, if your drips are too short, you need to microwave your ganache and or caramel a little bit longer. If they're too long, you might want to let them cool down a little bit. You also could add a little bit more chocolate into your ganache if you feel like it looks a little bit like watery or too thin. But for the most part, adjusting the temperature is what's really going to give you the perfect length of drips. And once we're happy with our drips, we're going to add some spirals on top of the cake with both the chocolate ganache and the caramel. Now, I was thinking about adding some buttercream dollops on top of this cake, but I kind of wanted it to look like the original version of this I made way back in 2014. So I just cut up Milky Way bars and pressed them in a circle on top of the cake. I also felt like the bottom of the cake looked a little bit bare, so I chopped up some semi-sweet chocolate chips that I had left over and placed them around the bottom of the cake and then sprinkled some between the Milky Way bars. And just like that, our Milky Way cake is all ready to go. I really love when a cake has a fun filling because it makes cutting into it so much more fun. So as you can see, this cake turned out fantastic. Those layers look so beautiful, and this cake really does taste just like Milky Way bar. Thank you so much for watching today. I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you want to recreate this cake at home, you can get the recipe in the video description below, or you can always Google Chelsweets Milky Way cake. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, happy baking.